Hey everybody, this is Jake Wynn from the National Museum of Civil War Medicine, continuing on in our South Mountain On Tour series here on YouTube. We have moved a little further to the east to downtown Middletown, Maryland. We are standing on the steps of the town's Lutheran church, the most notable church spire in town, with the town clock placed atop it today. And this facility, as you can see on the plaque right here, you may notice the words Army Hospital. And this building was used amongst many here in Middletown as a makeshift military hospital during the course of the Battle of South Mountain on September 14th, as well as the Battle of Antietam on September 17th, both in 1862. So Middletown plays a really crucial role in the Letterman Plan as it is adopted here in the Maryland campaign in 1862. From the battlefields at places like South Mountain and Antietam, patients would be evacuated to field dressing stations on the battlefield, first aid administered, then to division-sized field hospitals very close to the battlefield. So in South Mountain, that's going to be many of the farmhouses at the base, the eastern base of South Mountain itself. And then ambulances would be used to bring patients to Middletown. Middletown is going to take in casualties from both the South Mountain battlefields as well as Antietam 3 days later. And Middletown is going to play a really important role in the Letterman system as it is adapted to the Maryland battlefields. Middletown turns out to be about halfway between South Mountain and Antietam battlefronts to Frederick, Maryland, which was chosen by Jonathan Letterman, the medical director of the Army of the Potomac, as the main hospital and medical staging ground for the Maryland campaign. So Middletown is strategically placed in between the battlefields and the hospital center at Frederick, which was about a 2-day wagon trip or ambulance trip for these wounded soldiers. And so Middletown becomes kind of a halfway point in this Letterman system that is being adapted. This is going to be many of the buildings here in town, the churches, like the Lutheran church here, are going to be adapted into makeshift hospitals. One of the patients that's going to be treated here is Henry Tisdale of the 35th Massachusetts. We talked about his story in Fox's Gap, being treated at the Wise Cabin on the South Mountain battlefield. Well, once he is removed from the front lines, he is going to be brought here to Middletown. That is going to be on September 16th, 2 days after the Battle of South Mountain. Tisdale and his comrades, wounded soldiers in the 35th Massachusetts and other members of the 9th Corps of the U.S. Army and captured Confederate soldiers as well who were wounded during the battle, are going to be brought here to Middletown on their way towards Frederick, Maryland's hospitals. This is what Tisdale writes in his diary. He says, quote, "On the afternoon of Tuesday, September 16th, a train of ambulances came and all of us were able to be moved, were taken to Middletown and placed in the churches, vacant dwellings, etc. in town." He endeavored to get into the same building with Whiting, which is his comrade he mentioned in his battlefield diary entry, who was lost a foot during the course of the fighting at South Mountain. But he was not able to get into the same hospital with Whiting. He was saddened, quote, "was saddened to hear while at Frederick, Maryland, of his death from dysentery and weakness from his wound." He goes on to say, quote, "I remained at Middletown until the next afternoon." That would be September 17th. The citizens generally supplying us with food and other needs. When we were moved to Frederick, he was then placed into the Lutheran church in Frederick, which had been turned into a hospital. We'll pick up with Tisdale's story when we get to Frederick in our next video. But Tisdale is not the only soldier. There are going to be thousands that are going to pass through Middletown in the aftermath of South Mountain and of Antietam 3 days later. This is going to be a scene, this main street here in Middletown, of hundreds of Army ambulances passing through carrying very seriously wounded soldiers, some who had undergone amputations in the battlefield field hospitals, others with wounds to their guts, as we saw with our first patient that we discussed today from the 19th Virginia in our first video at South Mountain. And others you would see walking. One of the remarkable things is there were not enough ambulances for all of the casualties from these battles. And so many cases, those considered walking wounded would actually be expected to walk the 20 miles from the South Mountain battlefield here to Middletown, and then ultimately over another mountain range, over the Catoctin mountain range, back to the hospitals at Frederick. So you can imagine being shot by a mini ball or struck by shell fragments during the course of a battle, and then be expected days later to walk 20 to 25 miles over two mountains. Kind of hard to imagine, but this is what was expected of some of the casualties. Now, we did talk as well in a previous video about Rutherford B. Hayes, an officer in the 23rd Ohio Volunteer Infantry, shot in the arm during the Battle of South Mountain at Fox's Gap. He is among the officers that is transported here to Middletown and is going to be quartered for his convalescence in a private home. That is going to be in the home of Jacob Rudy. He is going to be brought here. This is a key difference between enlisted men and officers, especially the higher ranking officers. Officers are oftentimes placed into private homes and would not be brought into larger hospitals for enlisted men like the Lutheran Church here and others in Middletown and in the other communities here in Maryland. So Hayes is going to be brought here in the days after the battle. Is going to be brought to the Rudy house in the days after the Battle of South Mountain. His wife, Lucy, was notified back in Ohio of her husband's wounding during the course of the battle, and so she races to Maryland to be with her husband. This is very common. We see numerous cases of this from the Maryland campaign in 1862, especially prominent families with the means to do this. If they learned of their sons, their husbands, fathers being wounded, racing to the front lines to care for them in the makeshift battlefield hospitals. Lucy is among those to do that. Shortly after Hayes' evacuation to the Rudy home here in Middletown, his wife is going to be notified, and she's going to race here to the battlefield. In a letter to his mother, Hayes described the nature of his injury as he began to recover. He said, quote, "I am steadily getting along. For the most part, the pain is not severe, but occasionally an unlucky move of the shattered arm causes a good deal of distress." Lucy Hayes is going to arrive here in the days after the battle on September 14th. She is going to come here and try to find her husband, but was unsuccessful. She is arriving after the Battle of Antietam actually takes place, so there are 10,000 casualties plus that need to be cared for. So there's a lot of chaos in many of these Maryland towns. Ultimately, she does arrive here September 26, 1862. She learns of where her husband has been quartered, and she is going to show up at the Rudy house. Hayes wrote, quote, "Lucy is here and we are pretty jolly. She visits the wounded and comes back in tears. Then we take a little refreshment and get over it." Lucy Hayes is going to be coming to places like this, looking in on the wounded soldiers that are being treated here, and those that are passing through the city on their way through the town of Middletown on their way to Frederick. Ultimately, they're going to stay here for the next couple of weeks. They're going to maintain, Hayes is going to continue to improve. His condition will continue to improve. He saves his arm. He is able to keep his arm. It is not amputated. Ultimately, he is going to go back to his unit after a brief foray home to Ohio to recuperate, and he goes back to command the 23rd Ohio later on in the Civil War. In fact, to be wounded several times later on in the conflict as well. And the Rudy family here in Middletown, they never forget this young officer who is cared for in their home. They're going to remember well the Hayes family's time in their home here in Middletown. And when Rutherford B. Hayes goes on to be elected president in 1876, there's going to be quite a bit of publicity coming to the Rudy family because of their relationship in this crucial time period in his life during the Civil War, because of their involvement in the fact that Hayes, who goes on to become the president, is cared for in their home. There's going to be several newspaper articles written about it, and the Rudy family, when interviewed about this, remembers fondly Rutherford B. Hayes and his wife Lucy during their time here in the fall of 1862. So kind of a cool connection between the Civil War, the Battle of South Mountain, and the history of the United States presidency. Rutherford B. Hayes treated here in Middletown after the Battle of South Mountain. Thank you so much for watching this video, again, in the On Tour series. So this is a playlist. You can click through these videos to see all about medical care in the Battle of South Mountain on September 14th, 1862. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and if you'd like to support these videos, become a member of the National Museum of Civil War Medicine. You'll be directly contributing to content like this and supporting it. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.